The message from WTA headquarters landed in players' inboxes like a shockwave. The subject line appeared harmless, proposal for new ranking evaluation criteria, but the attached document immediately ignited controversy throughout the locker room. Buried within the 14-page report was a proposal unlike anything seriously considered during the WTA's 53-year history. A new metric. One that would incorporate fan engagement, ticket sales, and merchandise revenue into player evaluations. In other words, Alex Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina who had crashed ticketing systems, outsold every player in the Miami Open field combined, and attracted crowds comparable to Grand Slam finals, was suddenly being discussed as a potential world #1 candidate. Not through ranking points, but through the metric tournament organizers value most: revenue generated and seats filled. The response from players was immediate and intense. Athletes who had spent years climbing the rankings the traditional way, winning matches, battling through tournaments, and collecting points, were now being told that a player who had never won a Grand Slam, never entered the top 20, and had recently fallen from number 29 to number 45 might be viewed as the sport's biggest attraction. As debate spread across social media, one question echoed above all others: is tennis about who wins, or who fills the stadium? The discussion began with a spreadsheet. In the aftermath of the Miami Open, WTA executives reviewed the tournament's financial results. What they discovered was extraordinary. Alex Eala had not simply participated in the event. She had transformed it. Her matches accounted for nearly half of total ticket revenue. Sales of merchandise carrying her name represented 57% of all tournament merchandise sold, more than every other player in the draw combined. The ticketing platform crashed on opening day as Filipino fans rushed to secure seats. Every session featuring Eala sold out within hours. The championship match, by comparison, was never expected to reach capacity. The figures were remarkable. Coco Gauff, Iga Swiatek, Aryna Sabalenka, and the rest of the world's highest-ranked players collectively generated fewer merchandise sales than Eala alone. At the Australian Open earlier that year, Eala's pre-tournament press conference attracted 196,000 views, more than 6 times the audience of Carlos Alcaraz and nearly 20 times that of world #1 Aryna Sabalenka. Her opening round match on Court 6 created lines that wrapped around Melbourne Park, forcing security staff to turn away hundreds of spectators. Earlier in Dubai, ticket sales had increased 48% year-over-year, a surge many attributed directly to Eala's presence. Tournament director Sula Talik acknowledged the phenomenon. She attracted a new demographic to tennis, and the stadium was sold out for all her matches. People were desperately trying to get tickets, but they were all gone. "We've never seen anything like it." The numbers painted a picture tournament directors had never witnessed before. Alex Eala sold out every session she played. Her merchandise represented 57% of all tournament sales. The ticketing system collapsed under overwhelming demand from Filipino supporters eager to watch their hero compete. Coco Gauff, the American star who had spent years inside the top 10, summarized the phenomenon during a post-match interview. "Alex has a huge fan base. She actually would be #1, probably." Now the WTA was reportedly considering making that idea official. Not by requiring Eala to win additional matches, but by modifying the criteria so her popularity could be formally recognized. The proposed fan engagement metric would effectively identify Eala as the sport's biggest attraction regardless of on-court results. The 14-page document circulating through player inboxes introduced an idea never formally considered during more than 5 decades of women's professional tennis. The Tour Architecture Council, a 13-member group led by Jessica Pegula and created to recommend changes to the calendar and ranking structure, had quietly worked on proposals for months. What emerged was far more ambitious than many expected. Hidden within the document was a proposal for a fan engagement metric that could influence tournament seeding and potentially year-end awards. The formula would consider ticket sales generated by individual players, merchandise revenue, television viewership, and social media activity. Its stated purpose was to better align commercial success with competitive outcomes. Its unstated purpose, according to many players who reviewed it, was obvious. Elevate Alex Eala's status within the sport regardless of her ranking position. The timing was notable. Only weeks earlier, the WTA had announced the creation of the Tour Architecture Council with a mission focused on player burnout and the increasingly demanding calendar. WTA Chair Valerie Camillo had informed players and tournament officials that the council would provide recommendations to the WTA board with hopes of implementing a revised structure by 2027. Jessica Pegula, the 31-year-old American selected to chair the group, was praised by Camillo as a respected player with a thoughtful and collaborative approach. Yet the proposal now generating controversy had little to do with burnout and everything to do with maximizing the commercial impact of the tour's most powerful draw. The council had expanded beyond its original mandate and entered ranking policy territory. In doing so, it opened a debate that threatened to divide the locker room. The backlash arrived almost immediately. Within hours of the document circulating, player group chats were flooded with criticism. Veterans who had spent years climbing the rankings through victories and consistency viewed the proposal as a threat to the sport's integrity. Younger players who had always been told results were the only currency that mattered suddenly faced a future where popularity could carry equal or greater weight. One top 20 player, speaking anonymously, expressed frustration. "So I can win 15 tournaments in a Grand Slam, but if I don't sell enough jerseys, I get seated behind someone who's never made a semi-final. That's not tennis. That's entertainment." Another player was even more direct. "They're trying to crown her before she's earned it. Everyone sees what's happening. The WTA sees the money she generates and wants to protect it. But you don't rewrite the rules because one athlete has a passionate fan base. That's how credibility disappears." Over the following days, the atmosphere around the Miami Open became increasingly tense. Players who had admired Eala only weeks earlier found themselves caught between respect for her accomplishments and concern about a system that appeared to be bending around her. The statistics driving the proposal were impossible to dismiss. In Dubai, ticket sales increased 48% because of Eala's presence. In Miami, her merchandise outsold every other player combined. Tournament directors had spent months urging the WTA to capitalize on what they called the Eala effect, the phenomenon of packed venues, overwhelmed ticket systems, and record merchandise sales that followed wherever the Filipina competed. The trend had already been documented extensively. Even the WTA is starting to take notice, columnist Bill Velasco wrote. Due to overflowing Filipino crowds, Alex's matches are now being moved to center court to accommodate spectators and improve television presentation. Because of the overwhelming support she received, Eala increasingly became a favored wildcard selection at tournaments where she did not qualify directly. Call it favoritism, Velasco wrote, but thankfully, for once, it is benefiting a homegrown Filipino athlete. He described it as a rare example of mutual benefit. The more we support her, the more opportunities she receives. The more she plays, the more points and prize money she earns. The higher she climbs in the rankings. The WTA had already been making adjustments for months. But the proposed ranking metric represented something much larger than simply moving matches to center court. To many players, it signaled a willingness to alter the fundamental principles of competition in order to accommodate the commercial value of one athlete. For competitors watching from the sidelines, that was difficult to accept. Many had spent years battling through qualifying draws, collecting points, and enduring the demanding schedule that Aryna Sabalenka once described as insane. Elena Rybakina had recently pointed out that players often felt compelled to compete simply to avoid losing ranking points. Now, some believed the rules themselves might be adjusted in ways that benefited one player more than others. Others viewed the proposal as evidence of a broader issue. For years, the WTA had struggled to market its stars the way the ATP successfully marketed figures such as Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. The Eala effect finally delivered the kind of commercial momentum the organization had been pursuing for decades. And many believed the WTA was determined to preserve it before the opportunity disappeared. But in the process, it risked alienating many of the players who helped build the tour. Through the entire controversy, Alex Eala remained silent. Her Miami Open run had ended in the fourth round with a 6-0, 6-2 defeat to Karolina Muchova, a result that extended her record against Czech opponents to 0-13 and pushed her ranking from number 29 down to number 45. She left Miami with 120 ranking points and $105,720 in prize money, a respectable outcome for most players, but one that felt disappointing considering the expectations surrounding her campaign. In her post-match press conference, she addressed the loss with the same composure she had become known for. "I'm in a position where this tournament is not all or nothing," she said. "Not everything's on the line. In regard to how I approach expectations and external noise, it's that I know my truth." But the noise was only beginning to grow louder. When reports about the WTA proposal surfaced, Alex's team released a short statement. Alex is focused on recovery in preparation for the upcoming clay season. She has no comment on matters outside her control. The silence was deliberate. Eala had never requested the special consideration that some believed the WTA was exploring. She had never asked tournament directors to place her matches on center court, nor had she suggested that fan support should influence rankings. She simply played tennis. The crowds arrived on their own. Speaking with Andy Roddick on the Serve podcast, Eala reflected on her rapid rise in popularity. "It's hard to accept or really see yourself being someone with that much influence," she admitted. "Nothing changed much in terms of who I am from 2025 to 2026. It's just that my success kind of skyrocketed, which I'm very thankful for." She described the growth as a gradual process rather than one breakthrough moment. "I would consider myself fortunate enough to have been exposed to a certain level of fame even when I was in the ITF circuit. If I compared the fans I had to other players around my ranking, even at 150, it was a little bit more. Definitely nothing compared to now." The shift became more noticeable during the opening months of the 2026 season as larger crowds began following her across multiple tournaments, especially in Melbourne and Manila. "I seriously noticed that it was coming. People were really coming. They were buying tickets. They were taking time out of their day," she said. "I saw videos after my match, the lines, and the people, and I was really surprised. I think I was a little in denial at first, but every week they just kept coming." That steady support marked a turning point in her career. "I was like, okay, you have to accept this, absorb it. You're here. It's a really good position." Yet remaining silent during such a heated debate was also a message in itself. By refusing to engage publicly, Eala signaled that she did not want to become the symbol of a system many players viewed as unfair. Every time she stepped onto a court, she represented what many believed the WTA was trying to monetize. Every packed stadium became evidence for supporters of the proposal. Every sold-out session became another talking point in the growing debate. She could not control the machinery moving around her. She could only control her performance. As she prepared for the clay court season, Linz beginning April 6, followed by Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros, she carried that pressure with her. The practice courts of the Rafa Nadal Academy, where she developed the patience and tactical intelligence that became trademarks of her game, felt worlds away from the political battles unfolding throughout the tour. But those battles would travel with her. The debate surrounding the proposed ranking metric exposed a deeper tension within professional tennis. For decades, the sport had operated under an unwritten principle. Results are earned. Rankings are built through victories. Matches won matter more than merchandise sold. The court is the final judge. Yet the Eala phenomenon challenged those assumptions in ways tennis had rarely experienced. A player who had never captured a Grand Slam title, never entered the top 20, and had recently fallen from number 29 to number 45 was generating more merchandise sales than every other player in the field combined. She was overwhelming ticket platforms and attracting crowds comparable to major finals. By commercial measurements, she had become one of the most valuable figures in women's tennis despite not yet possessing the resume typically associated with that status. The proposal was an attempt to address that contradiction. If Eala was the sport's largest attraction, should her status reflect that reality? Should tournament organizers have more flexibility to prioritize matches that fans clearly wanted to watch? Should rankings recognize influence as well as victories? Many players answered no. To them, tennis was not a popularity contest. It was a merit-based competition. The rankings carried value because they reflected actual results, not marketing power, audience size, or social media reach. Changing that principle, they argued, would undermine the sport's foundation. Eala herself addressed the weight of expectations during her conversation with Roddick. "If I can master the times I need to be confident and the times I need to be humble and grateful, I think that's an amazing recipe," she said. "I'm able to compete and do my thing on the court, but I'm also aware of what I represent off it." Whether the WTA ultimately changes its rules or whether player opposition prevents those changes remains uncertain. The proposal to include fan engagement in rankings has divided women's tennis into two camps. On one side stand the traditionalists, players who believe victories should remain the only currency that matters. On the other side stand the numbers. Ticket sales, merchandise revenue, and television audiences that suggest Alex Eala has become one of the sport's most valuable attractions regardless of Grand Slam success. Eala never asked for any of this. She never requested special treatment. She simply played tennis. The crowds followed. Now she finds herself in the middle of a controversy capable of reshaping both the locker room and the future direction of the sport. As she prepares for Linz, Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros, that reality follows her everywhere. Her ranking sits at number 45 following her fourth-round loss to Karolina Muchova. Her record against Czech opponents stands at 0-13. The path ahead remains challenging and uncertain. But one thing seems clear. Regardless of what happens next, Alex Eala has already altered the conversation around women's tennis, and the debate over how her impact should be measured is only getting started. Should the WTA change its ranking system to account for fan engagement? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe now for daily WTA updates, match analysis, and stories that go beyond the final score. Because every day is match day.